Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new League of Legends video. So I'm here to ask you the question, how good is Katarina? Well, as it turns out, she's pretty good. So if you haven't guessed from the title of the video, that was my Kripparrian expression. But with that aside, in this video, we will be talking about Katarina. This is a champion I feel like a lot of people are scared of and no one wants to see this champion rise back to her popularity. However, thanks to the buff on her Q this patch where it now deals full damage to every single target hit, on top of also doing a bit more damage on the activation portion of it. Well, as I'm sure you can see through this graph, her play rate this patch has gone up quite significantly and I'm expecting it to go up even more. So in my opinion, Katarina is right now and even will become more of a hot subject. This is a champion that is going to be rising in popularity and well, it begs the question, how good is Katarina at the moment? So just like many of my other videos, we'll go through various topics in this video talking about Katarina, like the positives, the negatives, the build, the items, the runes, masteries, tips and tricks, and a whole bunch of things, and then the final rating at the end of the video. But right before we get into that, the question of the video is, what champion do you want to see get nerfed? And if you end up enjoying this video, please don't forget to hit that like button to show your support. So as usual, let's first start talking about what are the positives and negatives of Katarina at the moment. So one of the first things to look at is, well, what is the meta currently? For the most part, there are quite a bit of high damage dealing champions, and for the most part, high damage dealing champions don't really have a lot of CC in their kit. But at the same time, top lane and the jungle tend to be champions with a fair amount of CC, such as maybe Udyr, Volibear, Nautilus. So for the most part, the meta seems to be in a decent spot for Katarina. There's a mix of CC champions and non-CC champions. So it may not be the best meta in the world for Katarina, but for the most part it's good enough. Then you have the buffs to her Q that it now deals full damage. So not only does this make her laning phase much better because you can actually harass with your Q by using it on minions first. But later on in the game when the team fights begin happening, well, if you have your Luden's Echo and you start throwing your Qs for poke, for harass, well, it's gonna do a lot of damage now, especially if it bounces to every champion it can. So this buff was surprisingly quite good on Katarina, and it really made people realize how much damage and how much potential this champion can really have. I mean, a lot of people really hate the fact that she has no resource or no mana and nothing like that whatsoever. She can spam her abilities in lane as much as she wants as long as her HP is still there. So to many people it feels a little odd that an assassin has such an interesting mechanic to her. And for the most part this is what makes Katarina kind of an annoying champion that is also very annoying to deal with. But on top of being an assassin who has a lot of potential in teamfights and a fair amount of burst, she doesn't have any direct skill shot. I mean, technically her W is a skill shot, says it's not a point and click, but it's not a true skill shot like maybe something like a ZQ, a Lux Q, pretty much any of Xerath's abilities and things like that. You have Thunderlords, which is actually quite fantastic on Katarina because for the most part what it takes for Katarina to go ham in a team fight is that first kill, and Thunderlord's base damage and overall extra damage makes that a lot easier. Being able to have the free yellow trinket now, which essentially is your free ward hopping tool, is also a very nice little addition from a while ago. But at the end of the day, Katarina just feels strong right now because Luden's Echo is fantastic on her, Thunderlords is great for that burst damage at the beginning to get the initial reset going. The meta isn't just fully stacked with CC champions, especially in solo queue. A lot of players are just picking champions for the sake of carrying their team, and those champions tend not to have the best amount of CC. Oh yeah, and Abyssal Scepter is also fantastically strong. And I'm not even sure if fantastically is even a word. But as usual, the negatives for a champion, in this case Katarina, are she has no CC in her kit like many other assassins for the most part. But at least someone like Talon has a slow, at least Zed has a slow, even Kassadin has a slow as well. And on the flip side, CC actually hard counters Katarina because, well, for the most part, her ultimate is her primary source of damage in a team fight. And if you haven't already guessed, her ultimate is a channeling type ability, so you have to kind of stand in one spot, spinning around, and if anyone hard CCs you, well, it's gonna stop. At the end of the day, she is an assassin, so she is relatively squishy, and her laning phase, even though it's definitely better, is still not among the best in the world. But now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about some quick tips and tricks before we later go into the abilities, the runes, and all that good stuff. So a very good way to harass in the laning phase now that your Q does full damage to all targets is to use your Q on ranged minions while your opponent is probably hugging them because they feel safe around their own minions. It'll bounce to 3 of them, and then the final bounce, or maybe the second last bounce, will go to the champion. And you can do the same thing with melee minions if you're facing a melee champion, because chances are they're probably somewhere in between the melee and the ranged ones. All in all, harassing with your Q is much easier now because it doesn't matter how many things it hits before hitting the champion you want it to hit. However, with that being said, one nice way to harass your opponent also after you hit the Q on them and put the mark on them, usually they'll zone you out a little bit and not let you proc the mark by not being within your E jump range. So what you can do is jump on a minion that puts you just in range of the W AoE damage, attack them with that, dealing its pretty nice base damage, proc the Q damage, and then you have the move speed to run away and retreat. Also, I highly recommend keeping the yellow trinket for free ward hopping. I mean, usually you want to swap it out for either the red one or the blue one, but in Katarina's situation, it's not too bad. Also note that she does have fairly decent base damage on her Q and her W combined, since the Q does have essentially 2 parts to it. And the reason I'm saying this is because you shouldn't feel very inclined to rush offensive items first. For instance, if you're facing someone like Echo mid, you obviously want to get the Abyssal Scepter first, but out of the 2 components of the Abyssal Scepter, you want to get the MR one first, and then you want to get the Blasting Wand. Trust me, this will work out much better for you, because at the end of the day, you want to survive, you want to farm, you want to CS as often as possible with your Q. Essentially, you're going for your main items and you're waiting for the team fights, but again, after you get the Abyssal Scepter, you can probably go a lot more ham. But when the team fights finally do start, you don't and shouldn't be the first one in it as Katarina. Let some cooldowns be blown by the enemy, let your allies do some damage to them, wait for the right moment to strike, and then get the reset going with their Thunderlords. And finally, at the very bottom, you can see there's some typical combos whenever you're playing Katarina. Most of them are quite self-explanatory, but the one thing I want to mention quickly is the difference between using your E and then your Q, or your Q and then your E. For the most part, if you can, EQ is usually better because the damage is faster. However, the QE is a little safer because you have more time to see and assess the situation and know if you actually want to go in or not. But other than that, it should be quite self-explanatory. But I'm sure most of you are wondering, what abilities do I level up on Katarina? And I'm sure the thing I'm about to say is something that some people did not expect. So you definitely want to start with your Q first, and then if you're feeling safe in the lane, get your W, go a little bit more aggressive. If you're feeling scared and you feel like, you know what, I'm going to play it pretty passively, and just in case I get ganked, I want to be safe, get your E at level 2. But either way, at level 3, you want to have all 3 of your abilities. Now, if you're facing a ranged opponent in your lane, yeah, you want to max your Q first. However, if you're facing a melee opponent, max your W first. Trust me when I say this, the W damage maxed out first is very good. It is going to be surprisingly strong. But either way, you want to max your W or your Q first, again depending on the matchup, then max the other one next. Your E ability should be maxed last, and ultimate whenever you can. For summoners, I personally really like Flash and Ignite because I like going for those kills, I like going for those extra plays. But getting teleport instead of Ignite is really not a bad option because it helps you with the laning phase by a bit, and if you ever get a beautiful teleport, maybe top or bottom, well, that's gonna help you snowball by quite a bit. Next, let's finally talk about the build, the runes, the masteries, and the items, starting off with the runes and the masteries first. So for masteries, I highly recommend going 12-18-0. Now Thunderlords is fantastic on Katarina because it helps you with that little bit of extra burst to initiate your reset. However, if you really like Deathfire for whatever reason, which I personally don't, here's an example of how that mastery page can look like. But now going over to the rune page, now you want to always get magic pen reds. As usual, the yellows just really depend on what you're facing. Versus AP, get HP per level. Versus ADs, you want to get flat armor. Your quints are almost always going to be flat AP quints, and then the blues is where the things get a little more different. In the example I'm showing you right now, I have MR per level blues, or you can go flat MR instead, doesn't really matter too much. But again, Katarina's base damage is surprisingly good, so having a bit more resistances in your runes is not a bad thing. But here's the page where instead of having MR per level blues, I actually have AP per level blues. Now the enemy team has next to no magic damage and you just simply do not need MR whatsoever, well, this is a pretty good option. So again, at the end of the day, it really just depends on what you're facing, but I hope the options I have laid out for you are clear. But next, let's take a quick look at the items that I recommend you get. So in terms of starting items, you have an insane amount of options. You have cloth armor, Doran shield, boots, Potion of Corruption, or you have the Dark Seal. Now, how good are these items on Katarina? Well, again, it also depends on what you're facing and what you're really going for. At the moment, I'm kind of liking the Dark Seal because it helps you snowball a little bit more. The extra AP is nice, even though the mana is somewhat wasted, because you also get 3 potions to start with. But I've been noticing a lot of Korean Katarina players in the Diamond Elos start with the Potion of Corruption. To me, that's a little weird, but apparently it works out for them, so if you want to try that, then be my guest. If you're facing an AD champion, Cloth Armor is fantastic. However, if the AD champion is someone that relies on single target spells or auto attacks, obviously the Doran's is pretty good. Or if you're facing someone that has a lot of skill shots and you're scared you won't be able to dodge them, well, the boots can be quite good. I highly recommend going either Cloth Armor, Doran's, or the Dark Seal. Now for core items, you have the Luden's Echo, your Sork Boots, and you have the Zhonya's Hourglass. 9 games out of 10, chances are your Abyssal Scepter is a core item as well. But again, if they have absolutely no magic damage, then you simply don't need it. And that's the only reason that the Abyssal Scepter is not in the core section. Luden's Echo is an absolutely beautiful item in Katarina. Once you get it, you will love it. The damage on it combined with your Q is just absolutely gorgeous, and you are going to be doing a lot of it. So assuming you have your Sork Boots, your Abyssal Scepter, your Luden's Echo, and your Zhonya's Hourglass, I mean, I feel like it should be self-explanatory why Zhonya's is good. You can then go for something like maybe a Rabadon's, maybe even something like a Crystal Scepter, or even a Void Staff. It depends on how hard you're snowballing, how much damage is already on your team, and what the enemy team also has. But I highly recommend choosing between the Rabadons, the Void Staff, and the Rylai's Crystal Scepter. And on to the final part of the video. How good is Katarina? Let's answer that question. Well, I decided to give her a respectable 7 out of 10. I definitely think she's good. I definitely think she's strong, but the meta is still not absolutely perfectly ideal. She's always going to be one of those gimmicky champions where she'll either be exceptionally strong in a game or she's not going to be doing a whole lot. So in the right hands, this champion is ridiculously annoying and ridiculously strong, and also very, very scary. And like any other assassin, if she snowballs, well, she's gonna be hitting you like a truck, and she's gonna be resetting and probably hard carrying the team fights. So she is actually quite good. She's getting a lot of play rate, and I only expect it to go up even further and probably make Katarina even feel more stronger. But that is about it for this video, guys. The return of Katarina. If you did enjoy the video, don't forget to hit that like button to show your support. I'd really much appreciate it. Share this with your friends and check out my other videos as well. And here are my favorite answers from the previous video's question. What do you think about the Talon nerf? But thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you for the next one. Peace.